Askreddit Asks, what real event in your life, had it happened in a book or movie, would be obvious foreshadowing?
Seeing a wanted poster at my college library featuring 3 ridiculously cartoonish police composites. I then looked up an article to see what these people were wanted for. They had robbed someone in the dorms at my school. Huh, that's interesting. I was cracking up at how shitty the suspects looked on the poster. It was very odd. 3 weeks later, my house is being raided by the police and it turns out 2 of my roommates were on that wanted poster along with another one of their friends. It was wild. I lived with 2 of these guys and the police composites of them were so terrible that I couldn't recognize them. Edit. No. I was not the 3rd guy. I'm a white woman and the suspects were 2 black men and 1 white man. We lived off campus so I didn't get my own dorm room after this. I think the police eventually figured out who the suspects were because one of them had been on the football team and there was some security footage. Or maybe it was tracking of the stolen laptop. Quite a few guests at my wedding asked about why my sibling looked so bad. Joking about how he looked like he was knocking on death's door. He OD'd the next day during my honeymoon.
Same-ish. My bro was a mess at our wedding, but was able to entertain the kids by drawing chalk art with many hearts involved. He was high on everything, but had a gentle heart. During our honeymoon he was in the hospital. He OD'd that night. Cops, ambulance, etc. all was hidden from us for a few days. He passed away, meth-induced suicide on the freeway, about a year later. Our family tried everything. Don't let this example stop you from trying to save a loved one.
I'm not sure if this counts, but my mother was driving through a blizzard with me in the passenger seat. And I said, "Hey, you're going a little fast. You should probably slow down." She responded, "I know how to drive. I've been doing it for 30 years. Not a minute later we spun out right into the ditch. Edit. I woke up to an exploded inbox. RIP. To address some of your questions and comments. 1. Yes, she would have still spun out had I not said anything. Brakes or not, we were at a bend in the road and couldn't have possibly made it around at that speed. 2. She was quiet, embarrassed, and apologetic as we sat in the ditch waiting for help to arrive. I did not let her live it down for the remainder of the season.
My dad and I were just about to leave for my soccer game when I decided to rip a massive fart. I shat my pants. My dad starts laughing like a madman. Tears and stuff. Then proceeds to yell, "This is how you rip one." He shat his pants.
All these sad stories and this one actually had me laughing out loud.
A tender story of 2 shart in Marts.
When began pooping blood. All my co-workers in the bar were close as hell. So I confided. As expected they all joked along the lines of, "Oh, you might have butt cancer." Or something similar. Jokes on them. ... It was cancer. Gastrointestinal leiomyosarcoma. Been clear since October 2010 PSA edit. For those worried, if ya be poopin' da bloods. Bright red blood is indicative of being further along the gastrointestinal tract. Large bowel or later. Possibly, but not exclusively. An anal fissure, ruptured hemorrhoid or something of that nature. May not be anything too serious, but may need attention if it's ongoing. Consult your doctor. Dark brown, red and tar-like is indicative of being at the upper end of your GI tract. Could be indicative of problems in the stomach or small bowel. You could be looking at a serious diagnosis: IBD, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, etc., or like me, some form of cancer. Consult your doctor. Loss of blood for any reasons is a serious matter and should be assessed, and if needed, addressed. PSA edit 2. I'm just a random dude on the internet who had cancer that one time. Happy to give advice I've learnt from my experience. Or listen to your problems if you want to vent. However, if you're having problems, go see your doctor. Don't take a random dude from the internet's advice as gospel. Consult a professional.
There was one time a couple years ago when I was telling my dad about how our car was the only one that wasn't damaged or scratched. Which was interesting considering it was the oldest car we had. Surely enough, the next day I went on my usual route to school and was at a stoplight when I heard the deafening sound of someone slamming their brakes. At the time I thought, oh man, is someone about to get hit, just before I felt my car jolt forward. Luckily it was just a fender bender and me and my brothers came out fine. But it was interesting how it happened that day.
This kind of situation is why you knock on wood.
My stalker telling me on our first and only date that he used to treat women like shit. 4 years later, he still calls my work now and then to hurl sexual obscenities at me.
My dad's ex-wife still calls from time to time to tell him to fuck off. She literally calls and screams, "Fuck off," and then hangs up. Sometimes she switches it up with a "go to hell." They've been divorced for 45 years. Some people are weirdly tenacious.
I had 2 friends in college and we all had the same double major. One of them had broken his femur a year or 2 before. And I was on crutches for a broken ankle at the time. We had a conversation like this. Friend number 2, you two have a lot in common. You're both short and studying X and have broken your legs. Me. I mean, all 3 of us have the same double major. Friend number 2, well, okay, I guess I'm in the group too. But I don't want to have the injury in common with you guys. A week later, he broke both of his feet.
Broke both of his feet how?
I have the mouth of a sailor and I run it constantly. I had a teacher who I had gotten comfortable with over the course of high school and I ended up feeling comfortable to swear around him. He told me once that my mouth was gonna get me in trouble later in a professional setting if I didn't learn how to tone it down. Fast forward a couple of years and I was fired from my job for dropping an F-bomb in front of the company's CFO. One of my coworkers was fired from his previous job for calling his boss a clipboard wanker. Swearing is a daily thing at my job and everyone finds that story hilarious.
Did you work for a Christian Minecraft server?
One of the few solid memories I have of my biological father is him sitting me down and walking me through his absolute favorite song. Not just pointing it out on the radio, making me, a small child, really understand the lyrics and the story behind them. He left when I was 6 to go to the gym, ran off with a nanny, and I haven't seen him in 25 years. The song, Cats in the Cradle, don't let anyone fool you. The worst kind of deadbeat dad is the stereotypical kind.
I was taking care of my girlfriend while she had a really bad fever. The flu spread through her family and somehow made its rounds through my family, but luckily I didn't get sick. She commented that it was unfair that I never get sick. I thought back to when I last had to use a sick day at work and couldn't remember. I guess I was just pretty healthy or lucky. Later that week I was taking a shower when I noticed one of my testicles was a lot firmer and a bit bigger than the other. I did some quick research and came to the conclusion it was cancer. After many appointments and a surgery, sure enough, it was cancer. I got the cancer-free prognosis back in March, but I'll be under close monitoring for the next several years in case it makes a comeback. I appreciate everybody's well wishes. They seriously bring a smile to my face, and for all the men out there, please check your balls. Tell your brothers, your sons, your dads, your friends. Check your balls. I never thought it could happen to me, but here I am, one nutting it but totally healthy because I just happened to catch it early.
One of my earliest memories when I was a kid was when I was playing my dad's electric organ in the basement. There was an airplane bottle of tequila on top of it, the kind with the worm. The sunlight came in through the window and lit up the bottle. I was fascinated by it. I would pick it up and hold it. Today I am a recovering alcoholic. It makes a lot of sense when I recall a number of instances like these.
My dad is bald. Should have seen it coming.
I'm sorry for your loss.
My dad has a bald spot near his forehead. He's 67 and considering about 70% of his hair is still black. I don't know how I feel about my future scalp ecosystem.
My dad is not bald. Nor my mother. Or my grandparents for that matter. Apparently I've started a new trend for my family line. Lucky them.
My grandpa drove me home one day, but couldn't remember where to go. It seemed like he was looking for the house we lived in a few years ago before we moved. Which was unusual since use came to our new house many times. He ended up being diagnosed with Alzheimer's soon after that incident when he crashed his car into a light pole.
To be fair, the pole never used to be there. I think.
It came out of nowhere.
Woke up on a very humid morning with thunderstorms in the forecast. Our dog was laying in the hallway in front of the bathroom. We opened the bathroom door before heading to work and told the dog, "If it gets too loud, just hide in here." Later that day, a tornado hit our house. We lost our roof and most of our windows. Our dog survived with no injuries. Nobody else was home at the time. We were out signing a lease on a new rental house, a second bit of foreshadowing. I got home first and he was acting super guilty, like he thought we were going to blame him for the damage. We kept saying, it's okay," in a friendly sing-songy voice, but he didn't believe us.
Not one of mine, but it's related to me. The day before I was born, my uncle said he'd had a dream that I was born a blue baby like a Smurf. He and my aunt were woken that night from a knock on the door from my dad, who said my mum had gone into labor. When I eventually was born, it had the cord wrapped around my neck and was completely blue. I had to be rushed to be resuscitated. Baby blue Smurf.
Saw my dad get hit by a sprinkler while in the car. A seat behind him in the open window. Laughed in the most mocking way possible before promptly getting cut off by the next splash of water, which must have been angled slightly differently. Dunno if that counts as foreshadowing, but it's definitely something I'd see coming if it were in a TV show.
It counts and I love it.
Also, instant karma.
I pretty much struggled to make friends until 6th grade. Finally making friends and feeling a sense of belonging was the greatest thing ever. 7th grade was the shit. Then during the beginning of 8th grade something weird happened. All of my friends had classes together except me. We shared the same lunch, but I remember feeling incredibly left out because they were always talking about things I wasn't there for. They had inside jokes I didn't understand. I was alone again. I later learned my family was moving out of state. Within a month, we moved and I was literally back to nothing. I always saw that brief 8th grade year as a sort of foreshadowing of the storms to come. Edit. Thank you guys for the kind words. This was back in like 2007 to 8. My family ended up moving twice during my 9th grade year and then once more my senior year. Since I was a new student as a senior, I wasn't even in the yearbook and didn't have my senior portraits done. But by that point I didn't really care anymore. I used to love watching TV. When my dad got sick with cancer, I would watch it to distract myself. In the week leading up to his death, I kept seeing this PSA about how this girl older than me, but around my age, had watched her father also battle cancer illness. How he was getting worse. Eventually checking into the hospital, where the girl learned to accept and move on past his death and illness. As the father had died at the end of the commercial. I'm not talking about how this PSA only played on one channel. It was on every channel I would stop on. Sure enough, at the end of the week, my father signed on with hospice and died, while I took him dying hard. I think it definitely helped lessen the blow.
Targeted advertising is a bitch.
Rolled a 20-sided dice in the morning when I woke up. Got a 1. Proceeded to have a terrible fucking day.
There's a story called The Diceman. It's horrible. You should read it. Closing parenthesis.
Roll another d20, and you'll get lucky.
It's horrible. You should read it. Thinking face.
My cousin was an intensive care nurse. When I was 15 I was talking to her about her job and she told me she was currently looking after a patient who had been burnt. I remember saying to her that it would be horrible to go through something like that. A week later my family home burns down and I get pretty badly burned. Fucking jinxed myself.
When I was 16 I went back to my best friend's house after going to make out with my girlfriend for an hour. It was around 5:30 a.m. I went up to his room and he wasn't there. Went down to the garage because I knew he was fighting with his girlfriend and he would often take aggression out on a punching bag down there. I found him hanging. It was too late. I'm 36 now and I never go more than a day without texting or calling all my friends just to make sure they're okay. I.e. also volunteered for suicide prevention since exactly 1 year after the morning I saw that. You are a true friend. And great person for what you do. I'm very sorry for your loss.
Back when I was about to start high school, the whole family got together at my grandmother's house for an impromptu get-together. As I left with my mother, I asked, "Is Grandma going to be alone tonight?" My mother confirmed my guess. When asked why, I said, "I don't know. It just rubs me the wrong way." That night my grandmother had a massive stroke, and wasn't found until 2.5 days later. She lived, but she wasn't the same. My parents and I ended up taking care of her for the last year of her life. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I called up there once we got home.
My overall lazy attitude would be a massive piece of foreshadowing to my academic failures looking back on it.
Or, come on, you, capitalist slayer 6969. I'm sure that your academic failures couldn't have been that bad.
I mean, to me barely passing any classes for 2 years straight is pretty awful. But hey, maybe I'm wrong.
My grandfather went off to Japan when he was 20. My father grew up in America and worked in animation. My mother was born in America, grew up in Japan, then worked in animation where she met my father. I then was born in America, got into animation, and left for Japan when I turned 20. I'm not sure if that's foreshadowing, but it's certainly synchronicity.
I'd love to see a thread about synchronicity, but it's probably gonna get downvoted to hell and back before it catches eyes.
Your family is like salmon. They return to the same place to spawn.
My mum and dad had been married since she was 21. They had tried for a child for 15 years with no luck, and my mum was told she was infertile. They were in Malaysia for her birthday and she got a palm reading from this old lady. She said, "You'll have a girl. Followed by a boy. You'll have a health scare and die at a ripe age." At 40, my mum had meet female. My brother was born 3 years later. My mum had a tumor removed from her ear canal, making her deaf in that ear. She is now 66.
Fingers crossed for your mum. Edit. Word.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe to support the channel, and above all, have an excellent day, you wonderful people.